Migraines. I wanted to touch on this topic because I feel like there's so many people out there that, struggle with migraines or headaches or chronic tension in their neck, their shoulders. And I mean, it can be for a number of reasons, but I'm sure that those that have had those types of struggles have had treatment in those areas. So whether it's massage, chiro, osteo, all of those things that we do when we're in pain, we usually seek treatment. Now, this workshop is going to kind of dabble more into some of the things that you're doing outside of those treatments. And I'm sure that you've been given stretches or exercises, or you're doing something that will help prevent. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that you can pay attention to see if what the rest of your body is doing that may be attributing to some of the headaches or tension, or like whatever that head area problems are. Now, awareness is such an ideal thing, because when you become aware, you can actually make changes. So a lot of the clients that I have seen that have had chronic headaches, and some of them has gone so far as to having seizures related to head stuff, neck stuff. Okay, so a lot of the times when people come to me, they've been down the tunnel of treatment and they're usually better to some degree. But what are some of the other things that might be attributing, or might be like putting that big boulder in front of you that you can't seem to move beyond? Okay, so some of us will make efforts towards certain things, and then usually when I ask what are those efforts and what are they doing, we realize that our efforts might be made from the wrong area. So there's many of us that will adjust our body in a way that we feel like we need to adjust it according to posture or instructions, but how we're actually carrying that out in our body might not actually be helping us. So the key here is, if you're making an adjustment, does that bring relaxation? If whatever you're doing takes you from a different type of tension. So I just want to talk basically about your posture. So if you're someone that's constantly adjusting your posture, but you feel like you fall back out of it and then you adjust it and you fall back out of it. If you're someone that tends to live up here and then you kind of keep relaxing and then you keep noticing it coming back up here and then you try to push it down and you're in this battle, you might notice that you might want to tuck your chin back and then you fall forward and you tuck your chin back. So notice, are those adjustments creating tension? The ideal adjustment will feel very weird in your body, but super comfortable. So number one, take note of the things that you tend to do, the adjustments that you tend to make, and notice, does it trade one tension for another? Or do you get that weird, comfortable sensation? Now, there's many different reasons that you can have, migraines, and there's lots of factors that can contribute to it. So like diet, what you're doing for exercise, postural stuff. There's lots of things that can add to the layers of what's going on. It could be an accident that you can't seem to get beyond, but your body will adapt. It is when you have neck problem, what is the rest of your body doing to adapt? It doesn't mean those adaptations are actually helping. They think that it's helping in the moment. Our body tends to be overreactive when we're in that fight or flight. So a lot of the times we might not even notice those layers of tension that you've created to protect an area that might actually be feeding why it's still there in the first place. So we're going to kind of dive into some of the things that you can take kind of like pay attention to in your own body. Then we're going to learn to connect slightly differently. And then I'm going to show you some tricks that you can kind of integrate into life so that you're not constantly, or kind of taking some of the edge off of how you might be moving or compensating or holding the tension, right? So one of the main things that you can pay attention to is how you breathe. because your breath is a key to how well you're stabilizing in your core. But it also, if we don't stabilize well, we will breathe into our accessory muscles. So our accessory muscles will be more of a breathing of your shoulders, which can feed, right, that level of tension. So if you're someone that's fine in like stationary life, but as soon as you start to take on something dynamic that you brings on some tension, it might be the fact that when you become more needing of a faster breath, or you've intensified whatever you're doing, you might be going more into this type of breathing, which will feed some of the problems that you're feeling. Okay, so number one, we're going to kind of dive into breath. We're going to talk about neutral spine. So if you think about a stick with a bowling ball on top of it, if I hold that stick straight up and down, my arm does not have to work that hard to keep that bowling ball on top, right? If I think about bending that stick slightly, so the bowling ball on top of the stick, now my arm has to work really hard to keep that bowling ball from falling, okay? Bowling ball, spine is your stick, okay? Now, obviously our spine is not straight like a stick, but we do have curves in our body. One curves one way, one curves the other, one curves the other way. The idea is to have that alignment that is similar to what I just explained with the stick. Now, if you have more in one, then your body will compensate in some way, right, to adjust that. Now, is that adjustment getting you more to the straight up and down stick, or do you have a bit of a tug of war? Now, the tug of war can happen from, this way and this way, but it can also happen from this way to this way. So we're going to kind of dive into where does your head sit on the stick, okay? Then we're going to talk about the whole fight or flight of our body. If we're in fight or flight, so if our body is stressed, its one job is to keep you alive. Now, you might not even notice that you're in that state, but what happens is your body is at a very heightened intensity, so it tends to overreact. You tend to breathe high. You tend to struggle with getting to that relaxed state. So another way to get out of that fight or flight so that you can make change, it's really hard to make change on an already stressed body by adding more stress. So especially when it comes to our head, our neck, the whole migraine thing, it is an area that is influenced by a lot of different factors, right? So is your spine stacked? And then what type of factors are pulling, okay? There's usually a tug of war going on when you don't have that alignment. Okay, now when I talk about alignment, everybody has different curves in their spine. If the whole idea behind it is we want to find that neutral spine. So what that means is if all the bones of your spine sit exactly where they should sit, there's no tug of war on the muscles, there's no stress on the ligaments, everybody is happy. It takes the least amount of energy for your body to be there. Okay, so in that relaxed state and everybody's happy, you will have a low breath, a wide breath, and you will be able to move from an area where everything's connected to your foundation. There's not an overreaction to one muscle fighting over the other, because there's always a chain reaction to one muscle doing something that the other one isn't. Where does that show up in your body? So if you're in an accident and you had like a whiplash, there's a reaction to that whiplash, and anyone that's been through it, you'll feel the amount of tension that your body's trying to protect it. But now we need to peel down all those layers of protection as you start to heal, to make sure that you're coming, that it's coming from an area of support, okay? And many of us look at this, but we don't look at what happens down here, which is usually why we tend to struggle a little bit more with neck migraines. And I mean, there's lots of other factors out there. This is just one of the things that I tend to see commonly when it comes to people that have that chronic migraine debilitating thing. And obviously, just like everybody has unique situations, this may not be the perfect answer for some of you, but I'm just looking at it from a different view. So I'm just giving you a different view, so a different path in which to venture down, okay? And as we go through this, you'll start to realize that either you don't see some of the things that I'm talking about, or you do, and then there's another branch of how you can support and get yourself beyond some of the neck and shoulder and head and migraine pains. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take you through, there's going to be some repetitiveness because we're going to add different layers, but we're going to look at gravity. Our body works on our body in different gravities depending on the position we're in. So we're going to look with our hips extended, so standing. Then we'll also lay, so it's the same position. You're now just either lying on your back or lying on your tummy. What happens? And then we're going to look at sitting. So sitting in a chair versus 4-point versus side lying. All of these positions will tell us different things. There's going to be key things that we're going to look for. So we're going to look for pressure points. Where do you tend to weight bear? Now, if you're connected to your core, there's certain parts that you should be connected to or that should make contact with the ground. So we're going to kind of dive through that. Okay, then we're going to look at breath in those different positions. Does some positions change where you breathe? Are you better in other positions? All of this will tell us another story about what a good position for you is when it comes to creating more of a connection. So if you breathe better in a certain position, then that position is really good for you to do like any type of exercise. If you can't connect to your breath, then we're going to teach you to connect to your breath in the positions that you struggle with. Okay. Now, another thing we're going to look at is some ways in which to support your body and some tricks to adjust your posture. I'm really talking with my hands a lot. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to sit in a chair. Actually, no, let's stand first. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to stand. And you want to stand with your feet like underneath your hips. And what you're going to take note of is where do you create pressure in your feet, okay? Is it different from one side to the other? Do you feel like you have more weight in your heel on one foot, more weight in your toe on the other? If you look down, do you notice that one foot might be in front of the other and you thought they were square, right? What does your hips do in relation to your foot, right? Do you tend to be a little bit rotated? Another thing is if you take a pen, right, because of our fluid in our inner ear, so you might notice that you might be a little bit here. You might notice that you feel pretty equal, but you notice that your body feels a little crooked outside of that. Or maybe you don't feel anything at all because when you live in that chronic state of tension, you stop feeling. So for you to be able to tap into those areas out of survival, your body will stop feeling. If you notice that you just don't notice, what we're gonna do is check to see where our head aligns, right? So is it off to one side? Is it tilted? So what you wanna do is take a pen and you're gonna find the crease, like there's a little divot here, which is the part of your sternum, okay? And you're gonna line a pen up with the middle of that. And you wanna look, where does your head sit in relation to that pen? Because this is your spine. So this is your sternum. So if I line it up there, is my head off to one side? Do you see a tilt? Do you see, shin lift or side tilt? Where does your head sit in relation to that alignment? Okay, because that a lot of times can tell us where you spend a lot of weight. Because of the fluid in our inner ear, our head will always be level to gravity. So our head will always be adjusting to create that balance, okay? Another thing to consider is if you do have, different vision struggles, you might notice that your body will adjust related to what's going on with your eyes. So there's another factor there that you may not be able to make a big change based on your posture, but giving it a better base of support will take away some of the struggles. Your body is super adaptable. Is it adapting in a positive way that actually helps you through life? Or is it stuck in the fight or flight and skip mode of not knowing how to connect or get back to some of the ways it might have been moving? Okay. So in standing, where do you hang out with your hips? So do you tend to, so if you looked at yourself from the spine or from the side, what I kind of explained it as, you either stand on your feet, right? Or stand on your feet, or you stand on your spine. Okay, so where are your hips in relation to your feet? And where is your shoulders in relation to your hips? Many people like to hang out here. This is also an area that I like to hang out in. It's kind of where I carried my kids. So do you tend to lock out your knees and fall forward? Or are you someone that tends to go into more of an arch and your rib cage is popping forward? Where does your head sit in relation to that alignment? Your ears, your shoulders, your hips, and your feet should all be in a general line. And it shouldn't be a struggle to get there, okay? If you have a hard time figuring out how you stand, all we have to do is lay you down. So if we lay you on your back, okay, now I'm in the same position as I was standing. What are my pressure points? Where do I hang out in my heels? Do your toes fall out, right? Can you stay fairly relaxed, keeping your feet facing up? What part of your pelvis, your legs, your calves, what part has the most amount of weight into the floor? Okay, where does the weight lay in relation to your upper, like your rib cage? Where does it lay in relation to your head? Now, the main point, so if you're in that neutral position, the contact point should be your sacrum. So like the top part of your, there's a flat bone there just above your bum crack. That should be there. There shouldn't be pressure through your low back because we have a curve there. It should be the border of your shoulder blades and the base of your skull. Now, me lying here, I'm good here, and you can kind of quick check. Pubic bone and your two hip bones should be in the same plane. Now, many people that struggle up here usually have a pubic bone that sits high, and you tend to flatten your back, okay? This is something common I see. Now, what would happen if you relax that down? Did you trade it for more work, or is it something that you need to educate? Okay, now, in relation to this, if you're the other way, so you don't like to straighten your legs because your hip flexors are tight, you might feel like your pubic bone goes lower than your hip bones. But what you should be able to do in a relaxed state is have that triangle in the same plane, okay? Then what does your rib cage do? Your rib cage should stack over top of this pelvis, okay? If you relax your ribs down, right, does your head change? Okay, so usually when I create the connection here, someone with neck stuff will start to hover through their head like this. Or lying on your back is not an option without a pillow. That's another indication that you're not connected to that stable base. So that foundation or the stick in which the bowling ball sits on, okay? Now, if you struggle with that position, what happens when we flip you over? Okay, so hands, you want to try to keep your head neutral. So you can be down here and forehead on the ground, or you can just put your hands underneath, right? What point? Now, if you are someone that struggles with knowing if your rib cage is popped or not, when we flip you over, you now have the gauge as to what's happening. Okay, if you pop your rib cage laying on your back, your belly button is going to be the main pressure point in this position, okay? So you're here, what parts of your body, again, a lot of people with neck stuff might not even be comfortable going into this position. That's also a note, right? When we create stacking, do we trade the stress or put the stress somewhere else, right? So when you're here, the main points you would want is your pubic bone and the bottom of your rib cage. Okay, and then what happens when you make that adjustment? Or are you someone that feels all belly button and you don't even know how to make that adjustment? Okay, so right now we've looked at standing. Where is our weight? where is our shoulders, hips, and feet as far as alignment, and where does our head sit in relation to that? Because it's always going to be a counterbalance as to what's going on below. Now, if you lie on your back versus your stomach, do things change? You're probably going to see a theme. If you struggle with that theme, reach out. I can usually help people with figuring out what that theme is and where to start. Okay, now what happens when we sit? So when we sit in a chair, okay, you want to notice, again, now the only difference between you sitting in a chair, we're still in that upright gravity, is do we buckle to it or can we sit up comfortably against it, okay? Common themes are, we're looking at that pubic bone again. If you tend to slouch like this, do you see how that creates a tension line from here to here? So then your arm is working really hard to stop that bowling ball from falling off the stick, okay? Do you sit on the bony parts of your bum? Do you even know what the bony parts of your bum is? If you don't, that might be something you'd want to venture down. Okay, then what happens in relation to my shoulder, my hips, and my head alignment? Many people sit like this, thinking that they're like this. So if you're someone who sits like this, you might feel your sit bones, but you're stuck in this forward, like you're leaning the stick forward and everything here has to work really hard, okay? Or are you someone that constantly adjusts their shoulders, but it causes your rib cage to pop forward, okay? Where you might feel like you're aligned, but you'll feel the stress of that being aligned, okay? Now, Sue, if this is a common thing for you or a common struggle, when we start to get this to connect to this, you're going to notice it's really hard for you to relax your shoulders because it's become a coping mechanism. So you might notice when you start to create this softening that your shoulders want to work really hard. Again, that's an indication that this is a foundational problem, not necessarily related to what's going on here. It's where this is in relation to what's going on here. You have a problem, you've looked at that problem, then what you want to do is look everywhere else to make sure that this problem is not a problem anymore. Okay, now we've looked at the pressure points in this position. Now if we change gravity, so we go into all fours. Okay, now this is kind of the same position as I was sitting, but now I have a load in my hands. Number one, what do you notice as far as weight distribution is? Okay, many of us will be working really hard in our upper body and we don't have the load here. That's an indication that we don't know how to use our hips, how to stabilize here, because it should be a well distributed and this shouldn't be stressful. So if you feel stress and you're doing exercises here, you're not going to get the full benefit from those exercises because you're kind of doing it from a stress state, okay? So just like laying, you want to make sure that your sacrum, so if you put a book at the top of your butt crack, you want that level to gravity. So let me just grab one so I can show you. So neutral pelvis, you want that triangle to line up. So if I put this on my pelvis, right? Now, if it won't sit on my pelvis, it wants to fall off, that's you tucked, okay? That's you flattening your back on the floor when we were laying. Okay, what happens when you get that block or book to parallel with the ground? Do you feel your rib cage sag? Okay, so there's that forward popping of your rib cage. The idea here is if I took like a piece of plexiglass and I put it from tail to head, you want the base of your skull, your shoulder, the edge of your shoulder blades, and your right above your butt crack in contact with that plexiglass. Okay, so same as when you did laying, but now your hips are bent. Do you have 25% of your weight between your limbs? What is your head doing? Many head, neck stuff, you're doing this. And then I say lift your head and they lift like this. Do you still see how the stress is here? So an adjustment that you can make is think about your face being parallel to the floor, and you're just moving your head further away from the floor. That in itself will help you connect to your shoulders. Are you just collapsed in your shoulders, right? Do you feel all sorts of stress? All of these things are just things to become aware of. So if you're spending time doing exercises, and if they're in any of the positions that I just talked about, what would happen if you tried something different? So you keep the same exercise, but become aware of how you might be holding tension where you shouldn't be and making a subtle adjustment. Now, if you can't make that adjustment, then you're going to need to venture down. How can I make that adjustment without causing stress, which is kind of what we're diving into next. Okay, so breath. Breath is an amazing tool to assess things. It's also an amazing tool to change things, because when it comes to your diaphragm, it is part of your core, and you also breathe with it. But most of us pick one. We don't necessarily have the capacity to stabilize and breathe at the same time. So if you're someone that, breathes high like this, you're breathing high like this and not stabilizing. Or you might notice that you're holding your breath and you're trying to stabilize. So if you're someone who does stuff and you notice that you're sucking in or holding, but you can't breathe at the same time, that's a choice you're making. You're making a choice to either breathe or stabilize, but we need to be able to do both, because when we can do both, movement comes from a relaxed state. Our posture comes from a relaxed state. Right now, all you want to do is change the alignment that you tend to hang out in to find the most relaxed state, because chances are you feel stress in the position that we tend to hang out in, which is just showing up here. Okay, now tricks to connect you to breath. So we're going to put you back to standing. We're going to go back to all the positions we just did, and I want you to do two things. Now, when you breathe, so the first thing you're going to do is just assess where you breathe. So you're going to breathe in and you're going to breathe out. And what I want you to notice is, where does the breath go? Okay, so does it go up here? Does it go here? Does it go here? Does it go just here? Well, a lot of people are aware of belly breath, but we tend to be very front and not this 360, which is where we want to have that foundation. So you're putting up a front door, but you don't have the rest of the walls. Okay, let's take a breath. Okay, what gets bigger and what gets smaller as you inhale? So take standing, do it again. Okay, now we're going to change one factor. Wherever you notice that you get bigger, so for me, I'm more here. So whatever you tend to get, you expand, I want you to restrict that as you breathe in. And then I want you to make that go big as you breathe out. So for example, if I breathe here as I breathe in, if that's what I notice, now what I'm going to do is reverse that. So I'm going to keep this stationary as I breathe in. And then as I breathe out, I'm going to let that get big. Right? So the idea behind it is you will breathe where you have movement. If we restrict where you have movement, it's going to force your breath and movement to another area. So it's going to change how you connect. So wherever you notice that expansion, restrict it. So my ribs went out. So I'm going to take a deep breath in, and I'm not going to let my ribs come out. And then when I breathe out, I'm going to let my ribs come out. So it's kind of a brain trick that you can play with your breath and help you connect to areas differently. Okay, so now we notice, so when I was standing, I felt the breath here. Now we're going to take you to lying. And we're going to do the same thing. Okay, notice how you're laying and take a deep breath. Okay, now for me, my belly got bigger when I breathed instead of my ribs. So now I'm going to restrict my belly. And then let my belly come big. So that moved it to the side. Okay, now I'm going to flip onto my tummy. And I'm going to take a deep breath in. What gets big? Now I felt that more through my chest, like my sternum pushing into the floor. Now I'm going to stop that from moving as I breathe in. Okay, then I felt it move somewhere else towards the back. Okay, now what happens when we go into, just since we're down here, we'll do 4-point in this position. Okay, so I'm going to take a deep breath in. And then I'm going to breathe out. Where did I go? Okay, I felt that more in my ribs. So now I'm going to restrict my ribs. Okay, and the minute I restrict my breath and my ribs, it was like it took away all my breath. So for me, that's like, that's something I need to work on because this position does not support, or I struggle with creating movement somewhere else. Okay, now what happens when I go into a chair and do the same thing? So I feel it more through here. Now I'm going to restrict it. And I feel that happen like here and through my pelvic floor. Okay, something as simple as changing where you breathe will help you connect differently. It's just doing something different. Notice what you tend to do and see if we can make change. And then we want to integrate that into life. So number one, this would be an exercise in which you could create a better connection to kind of take away some of the extra stuff that's going on here, noticing what your alignment is. And now another trick that you can add to life is take time to smell the air. So we just breathed. So I said, take a breath, and you notice what you noticed, right? So take a breath right now. And wherever it went, it went. Okay, now I want you to actually take time to smell the air. And notice how much deeper and lower and more connected that breath was. And all you did was take the time to smell the air. So now you can add that to pretty much anything in life. If you're sitting at your desk, if you're feeling your neck, if you're having one of those migraine situations, it takes nothing for you to sit or wherever you are, is just take time to smell that air, because it changes how you do something with as simple as just the awareness in which you're doing it by. Okay, so assess where are your pressure points in all those positions, assess your breath, then you're going to connect differently. So you're going to change what's inflating and deflating. Now you're going to add the smelling the air throughout life. Okay, now what else can you do to make adjustments? So if you're someone that likes to, set your shoulders down and back, let's look at creating an adjustment slightly different. So a slightly different way to create a change in your posture, right? If you notice that you're someone who leans forward, just try leaning back. And it's not leaning back like this. It's literally like you're in a chair that's folding and you want to push that back of the chair back up. You'll notice your core kick in just in that little adjustment, okay? Another thing you can do, because we tend to struggle with where is our head, like how come I can't connect with it? If you put your hand underneath your chin, and I say relax, so it's like a shelf, right? And you don't want to have your elbow here because then that creates work, but you're just going to create this with an awareness. So I've got my fingers underneath my jawline, and what I'm going to do is just relax my chin on the shelf. Okay, and you'll probably see from the side. So if I'm here and I put my chin or my hand under my chin and I relax my chin on the shelf, notice what happened, right? It instantly brought me into a better alignment. Okay, now can you do that without your hand there? Your hand is like the awareness, okay? And then what you're gonna think about doing is when you're in this position, can you just rest your chin on the shelf? Okay, that in itself will make a giant change. What you should notice, if you can connect to it, depends on how many layers you got going on. But if you can connect to that, what you'll notice is that weird, this is unfamiliar, but I'm super comfortable state. Okay. Another thing you can think about is like your nose is on a cliff, and you want to think about your nose pulling you up the cliff. So like if my hands were pulling me up a cliff, right? You just want your hand goes under your nose and you're going to use your nose to pull yourself up the cliff. Okay, which is a slightly different awareness. Again, everybody's compensations are slightly different, so you're going to play with one. What do you tend to do? Right? Are you one that over exaggerates this? Well, this is just trading tension for tension. Okay, so what would happen if you rested your chin or you used your nose to pull yourself up? Okay, try those out. And then when it comes to our neck, our grip is very powerful into adding to tension. And most of us, when we go to pick things up in a, anybody that has neck stuff probably doesn't like to pick anything heavy up. Okay, so if you have something like a bag or something nearby and you grab it, I want you to grab it from your index finger and your middle finger and just hold it and notice where the stress goes. And if you can do it on both sides, it's ideal because you'll probably notice that your body will want to like react to that. Okay, and even notice like where do you want to go? Can you hold that without a crazy amount of tension? So just notice, where does the tension show up in your arm? Okay, now what you're going to do is grab from your pinky and your ring finger and just notice how that completely changed how you're holding that. What you're going to notice is there'll be work back here, that it feels a little less stressful, that this will sit more relaxed. Okay, this is our dexterity. This is where our power comes from. So if someone who uses their dexterity to pick things up, you're going to notice a lot more shoulder neck tension. If you slightly change how you pick things up, and that doesn't mean picking it up with your pinky, that means creating your grip from your pinky first so that you're not over gripping from here, then it will give you more support in the things that you do throughout the day. So if you're lifting up your bag, your purse, groceries, moving a pot off of the stove, getting a glass or plate from the cupboard, just think about grabbing it from your pinky first, and it will help take a lot of the stress that will be compounding the problem. A lot of times we have a problem and we have a hard time getting over it because we haven't peeled away all the other layers that our body adapted related to that problem. And one of those problems can be a headache. And I like those that are debilitating. It affects your mood. You make life decisions based on how are you going to feel at the end of it. So any tool that you can have to take some of the stress out of that situation, it's like having a bruise on your arm and you keep going like this. Why aren't you getting better? You keep rubbing it, you're getting massages, but we don't look at how it is adapted or how you've adapted related to that pain in the rest of your body. So treatment is wonderful. It is like key to getting beyond an injury, but we also have to look at the big picture of why that might still be hanging on. I hope you found this useful. Feel free to reach out with any questions, concerns, even direction. I know sometimes this can be a lot of information. So just pause it, take in one. So you could just becoming aware of how you lay and just noticing, right? Sideline can also tell you a lot. Notice what your alignment is. The same thing as when you're sitting, when you're on all fours. It's all the same thing, just a different gravity, and each gravity will reveal something else.